It is time to take a closer look at the Force Recon ships in this game. Now the Force Recon ships are also better known as the Covert ships or Covert cruisers, and today I will show you a lot of different builds and I'll talk about a lot of different tactics that you can use with these ships. Now I will start with the good old RB. My first ever PvP ship was the RB, and I still keep the original RB in one of my stations. Now this is the RB3, the tier 10 version of the ship, and the RB2 and RB3 are generally very similar, although the RB2 is a lot more cheaper than the RB3, but all of these ships are very good, and all of these builds that you see here can be applied to all of them. So let's take a look at the trait description. Roll bonus, it can fit sign-on fit the generator, can fit core tops clocking device, minus 50% clocking device lock delay. Advanced micro drive operation bonus will give you plus 10% tracking disruptor jammer strength, minus 10% warp drive signature radius penalty. Advanced cruiser command bonus will give you minus 4% signature radius, plus 30% drone damage, plus 3 km drone command range. Overall, pretty solid stats, a good boost over the RB2. 4 drones, 2 high slots for medium slots for low slots for combat, and 3 engineering rigs, 18,000 hit points. The RB is primarily a armor tank. Now the capacitor on the RB is not the best, and the power grid is also not really that good on the ship, so you will probably have issues to fit a large module on this ship. However, the other stats are okay. The RB is not the fastest, but it's definitely not slow. It's fast, but some of the other Covert cruisers are definitely way faster. And let's take a look at the build. So 741.32 DPS. I have C-type rapid missile launchers in the high slots. Now you can use the torpedo launchers or you can use the normal medium missile launchers. All of them work. I did pick the rapid missile launchers just to be able to do more damage to small ships like frigates. 1 long range disruptor, dual tracking disruptors, a web. I have 4 drones. This is a drone boat and it has some pretty good stats on the drones. They're quite fast, they have decent range and overall do a lot of damage. 1 micro drive, 1 large armor repairer, a medium capacitor battery, and the clocking device. Now the clocking device and micro drive is basically a must on most of these Covert ships. Dual drone damage amplifier and dual drone speed augmenters, my apologies, and 1 drone firepower rig, 1 auxiliary thruster. Now this is 1 engineering integrated module that combines power grid with capacitor, and I have 1 other normal power grid router. 964 out of 993 power grid used, and this is a tight fit. I wasn't able to fit any better armor repair. 31,000 defense, 10,000 in armor, 460 meters per second is the speed on the RB. Now as for the implants, the RB can use 3 implants, or well, technically 3. The thermal circulation for tank, it can also use the bombard tactics, and it can also use the automatic defense. Now the automatic defense is pretty good for a fleet, as well as the bombard tactic, although I still prefer the bombard tactics because you can do so much damage with the drone bombs. It triples your DPS for a short amount of time, and with this ship for PvP I would go with the other secondary. No remote reload on this ship because the remote reload does reduce a lot of that DPS. As for the general units, a micro drive unit or a capacitor battery unit, as well as the tracking disruptor units are recommended to be used alongside this ship. Now the RB with the tracking disruptor units is going to be extremely dangerous. You are basically going to be completely eliminating the tracking or range of your target. Works only on turrets, and you can kind of combine the tracking disruptor alongside with the guided disruptor on the RB, although the RB has a bonus only on the tracking disruptors. But with a general unit, you can do a lot of things. A lot of things can be achieved, and I personally recommend to go with the range jamming because you can easily stay out of the range of your target. This is, after all, a kiting ship, and it does rely on range and speed to keep itself alive. 1068 armor every 8.72 seconds is being repaired. Now let me quickly take just another glance on the bombard tactics, because I feel like that should be a little bit different. Okay, 848 is the repair amount without the implant, which is fine. Okay, so the implant and the general unit do work. For a second I thought that they are bugged, but it looks like they are working at the moment. Okay, armor repair output boost. It does use a bit more capacitor, but if you play the ship properly, you are not going to take any damage, especially with the tracking disruptors. The RB can be a very dangerous little boat, and you can use the tracking disruptor unit on any implant. It's not really bound to the drone bombs, which is very good. And yeah, this is the build that I would use. Minus 78.38 accuracy fall-off and range skill bonus minus 78.38%. So yeah, your target will have a very, very bad day. You can also do the other one, the other unit, which does affect tracking. It doesn't affect range, but it affects tracking. Now, the reason why I prefer the range one over the tracking one is, if your ship is stationary, you will be hit. However, if the turrets on the enemy ship don't have enough range, they will not hit, even if you are stationary. So the range unit is good for that reason, although the tracking one is good as well for a different scenario. If you are solo hunting, then I would suggest that you go with the range one, but in the end both should work really well, and you don't have to worry about the performance of the tracking disruptors on the ship. A bonus from the units, as well as a default bonus that you get from the skills. And tracking speed is minus 78.38, which is a really nasty effect on the enemy ship. And let's unlock, just to show you what active ship looks like, to show the capacitor, speed, and things like that. Overall, the RP is not really the fastest, as I mentioned before. The Bellicose should be the fastest Covert Ops cruiser, although the RB doesn't really need that much speed once the target can't hit you. Okay, let's take a look at the speed, 2.6 kilometers per second, which is very nice. It is acceptable speed, and everything else is about the same. The capacitor lasts 1 minute and exactly 1 second. Now the drone bombs, obviously for some reason still they don't show you the actual DPS, but now the DPS is 300% higher, and I have about 3000 DPS on this ship with the drone bombs, which is honestly enough to cause some serious damage to the target. You can go with a build like this with dual points and one tracking disruptor as well as one web, also a long range build, and you can do something like this: dual disruptor, dual disruptors and the tracking disruptors. All of these modules are disruptors. I got confused for a second. And you can do triple disruptor and one long range point. Now you can do a build like this, give the ship a bit more resistance, and you can give the ship a bit more capacity with the Nosferatu. This is a medium Nosferatu, one disruptor, one web. Now I have dual tracking disruptors, one long range point and a Nosferatu, also a build that works really well. Now for close range brawling, I recommend an afterburner, and you can also do a build like this. However, the tracking disruptors have basically a accuracy fall-off, so they're not going to be as efficient up close as they are at about 23 or 30 kilometers. That's basically their optimal range. That's because these ships are meant to be long range ships, and they're not really designed to be brawler ships, but in some ways you can use them as a brawler, but in most scenarios a long range, medium to long range build is recommended, and for that you will have to use a micro warp drive. But if you prefer close range combat, you can do something like this. 23 kilometers is the accuracy fall-off, so below that range the ship's tracking will be, the tracking disruptor will have less effect. You can do a build like this as well, dual scramblers, a tracking disruptor and a Nosferatu, of course still using the afterburner because this is a close range build. You can use a damage control, although in some cases the damage control is not a good idea, but in some other cases it's very helpful, especially against ships that have the barrage implant. And there's a build like this with the capacity battery. You can do a mix between Scrambler and long range disruptor. Basically the Scrambler is there to keep the target in place, while the long range disruptor is there to capture the targets at a distance. And a build like this is also interesting. And we're back at the dual Scrambler build. I used to run a build like this a long time ago, although I quickly did swap back to the long range build. Now you can do something like this with a large energy neutralizer. Basically the idea behind this build is to kite the targets at about 20-25 kilometers. With the tracking disruptor they will not hit you, and you will kill their tank with the large neutralizer, and you have two capacitor batteries to sustain your own capacitor. Works with an afterburner, works with a micro warp drive, although a micro warp drive is preferred because you need speed for long range. And there is a build like this where you have one Nosferatu and a tracking disruptor and a long range point. Also a passive tank build, this time have one damage control, although dual batteries are the way to go if you plan to use the large neutralizer. And the rapid missiles are all very nice for all of these builds because it does have about the same range as all of the other modules, which makes it work perfectly with the build. Okay, well, time to go and jump on the other Covert Ops cruiser. I think the next one will be let's go with the Bellicose Covert Ops because the RB and the Bellicose are the two most popular ones, while the Celestis and Blackbird are not really that popular. But I will show you the builds on those two as well. The Blackbird can be extremely interesting, and you will see why. Now let me quickly remove the unnecessary nanocore. Okay, so let's take a look at the Bellicose trait description. This little boat is very good for PvP, very good for solo PvP, very good for fleets, and it should have a very nice bonus on target painters. So the roll bonus remains the same. It will be the same for all the Covert Ops ships. Advanced micro warp operation bonus will give you plus 10% target painter effect, minus 10% warp drive signature radius penalty. Advanced cruiser command bonus will give you minus 4% signature radius, and it will give you plus 5% medium missile torpedo flight velocity and plus 15% medium missile torpedo damage. Overall, the Bellicose should have the smallest signature radius, and it should be the fastest, which makes this ship a perfect speed tank. 1 drone for high slots, for medium slots, for low slots, for 3 combat and 3 engineering rigs. 70,000 defense. I think it has the lowest defense out of the 4 Covert Ops ships. It can be a shield or armor tank, preferably a shield tank. 2444 gigajoules is the capacitor, the recharge time 552 seconds, 11.0807 gigajoule per second is the recharge rate. Like I mentioned before, one of the smallest unit radiuses out of the Covert top ships, and it is the fastest Covert tops cruiser. So the power grid is even worse than the power grid on the RB, and fitting a large extender, for example, is going to be a challenge. But let's take a look at the build. So 018.38 DPS, I have the rapid missile launchers, dual painters, long range disruptor, a web, micro obdrive, large booster, damage control, and of course the cloaking device. A micro obdrive, a propulsion module, and cloak are mandatory for Covert top ships. After all, what's the point of Covert tops if it doesn't have a Covert tops module? Rocket fuel cache partition, loading bay accelerator, and a loading bay accelerator, so dual loading bays, dual auxiliary thrusters, and a polycarbonate engine housing. 29.8 kilometer missile range, flight time 5.78, 27.54 meter is the explosion radius, flight velocity 170 meters per second, 5.1 kilometer per second is the missile speed. Okay, let's take a look at the implant. Now with the missiles you have two options. You have actually three options, but I mostly use two of them because they seem to be working the best. Tactical missiles and warhead charge. Now, tactical missiles might be the PvP players, I guess, preferred implant, I would say, because it does give you some good damage and it also can point the target. The missiles can point the target. Now, for the general units, the output boost and the capacitor battery passive effect, as well as the target painter boost or output boost. You want to make the bloom of the target as large as possible so that you can apply as much damage as possible. And the damage application on this little boat is actually really good. So with the target painters on top of that will actually be even better. In even line I actually fly a Bellicose in a very similar way. The Bellicose is a speed tank ship and it should not rely on any active tank. After all, you have not a good capacitor and you obviously don't have a lot of power. So that's the way how to fly this rusty miniature ship. Although not as rusty as some of the other miniature ships, but you know, the rust is still there, of course. Okay, let me quickly readjust the modules just to make the UI look good. Okay, now the shield booster on this ship is practically useless. It will kill your capacitor in seconds. So I'll talk about that more when I show you the other builds. But first, let's take a look at the maximum possible speed that I currently have, 3.8 kilometers per second, almost 4 kilometers per second, which you know is really fast. And it can even be faster. Like I said before, this is a very, very quick little cruiser. The DPS is okay, 43 seconds the capacitor, 158 meters the single radius, a very small single radius for a ship that uses a micro drive, and 33,000 defense. The damage control can be good in panic moments, I guess. 98,000 hit points. It can save your ship, so a damage control is somewhat of a necessity nowadays, in PvP at least. And let's take a look at the DPS with the implant active, 805.96 DPS with the primary skill, and with the second skill the DPS is 997.16, so almost 1000 DPS with the rapid missile launchers, which honestly is pretty good. And of course the implant does give you some other stats. It increases the missile speed, range, and other things like that. Overall, a very solid implant, and for PvP it will probably do a very good job. I have the warhead charge and I used the warhead charge into PvP. If you can do a build like this, dual painters and dual long range points, and with this build you can easily go and run the warhead charge. Now the warhead charge is one of the more fun ones because it does give you sustained DPS. It does give you some other extra stats on the missiles like explosion velocity, and reduced explosion velocity, and increased explosion velocity and reduced explosion radius. Sometimes all these stats get confusing. My apologies. Happens. As they call it, a brain fart. It happens. Okay, back on the ship. So let me. Well, that was a quick adjustment. So dual painters, dual long-range disruptors, a micro-warp, a pure speed tank that should stay out of web or scramble range of any ship. The long-range mode, 38.74 kilometers. The DPS will be reduced a little bit, which is to be expected. Now the precision mode will increase the damage application. 531.78 DPS, 13.77 meter is the explosion radius, which is really good. And now the explosive missiles or thermal missiles, 162.66 DPS, and you get some really nice range and really nice stats. So pretty good DPS for a boat like this, and you can even increase the DPS with a different layout. Now, speaking of a different layout, you can also use the normal medium missile launchers for a better long-range build, because they have a long range than the rapid missiles, and they're good at dealing with cruisers, battleships. Although, be very careful around small ships, because small ships can outmaneuver the normal medium missile launchers, and this is why I prefer to use the rapid missile launchers for all ships, because they apply the damage to all ships really well. However, if you're hunting big ships, and if you are not really after frigates, then the medium missile launchers, the normal medium missile launchers, will have excellent range, excellent damage, and overall really solid stats. It has about 1000 cold DPS. 818.02 DPS is when the implant is offline with the long range mode. I should have about 60 kilometer range. Let's see, 67.95 kilometers, which is really good. About the same range as the target painters. And with the precision mode, the DPS is 101.49. 48.2 meter is the explosion radius, which is really good. But still, I would not fight smaller ships with the Bellicose, because it doesn't have the stats that the Ortus has, and the Ortus can easily pop small ships with the medium missile launchers, with the right build, of course. Alright, let's take a look at a different build. Now, we can use the ship as a brawler at close range, although the same rule applies to this ship as with the RB. They are designed to be used at medium to long range distances, because the target painter loses effect at close range. But in some cases, you can do a build like this, especially against snipers. A 0 kilometer orbit around a battleship that is sniping is going to work really well. Dual webs and dual scramblers are, for that purpose, excellent. After all, this is a very fast little ship, and it can easily avoid the large turrets from the battleships, or even the assault battlecruisers, which also use the large turrets. Okay, time to take a look at the next Covert Ops boat, and this is where things get a little bit interesting. Now, the Blackbird Covert Ops is definitely not the most popular one, and definitely not the Covert Ops that's widely used, but this thing is actually interesting for several different reasons. Now, the Blackbird has a bonus on missiles, and it has a bonus on guidance disruptors, but not only on medium missiles, it has a bonus on all missiles. In the description of the ship, as you will see, it's not really specified a specific bonus on a certain size of module. Basically, all missiles are going to have a bonus, so you can use the small missiles, you can use the large missiles, medium missiles, and you have literally 1,000 different builds that you can do with this ship. Now, the raw bonus is the same. Advanced micro warp drive bonus will give you plus 10% guidance up to damage strength, minus 10% warp drive signature radius penalty. Advanced cruiser command will give you plus 5% missile torpedo flight velocity, and the other one will give you extra damage. Now, as you can see, it's not specified as if it's medium or small or large. It says medium missile it says missile torpedo, so it counts on all missiles and all torpedoes, ranging from small to large, and technically capital, but you can't really fit a capital turret or capital missile launcher on this small boat. But on paper, some really, really, really nice stats. 1 drone for high slots, for medium for low, 3 combat and 3 engineering rigs. The power grid is much better than the power grid on the previous 2 ships. Now the Blackbird is primarily a shield tank. The capacitor is a little bit better, the recharge time and the recharge rate is also a little bit better, but the signage radius is slightly larger, and this boat is definitely a little bit slower than the Bellicose. And I think the main reason why players don't really use this ship is because it's slow. The Bellicose is faster, and speed is very important. Now, first thing that you will see here is the large missiles, of course. Mark 9 large rapid missiles. I managed to actually fit them inside, and they have some really good stats. 5.9 km per second speed, some very good explosion radius, and the velocity is also very nice. Maximum range 46.12 kilometers. 1 long range disruptor, dual guided disruptors, and one web. Here you can take a look at the stats that you get from the bonus. Again, the Blackbird is designed to be used against ships that use missiles, and it will cripple missile ships if you end up fighting them, like a Barghest, a Raven, a Typhoon, and ships like that. The rigs are very similar to the rigs that I have on the Bellicose, with the exception I have triple ancillary power grid routers to make the power grid as big as possible. Now for the implants, you also have 2 options. You have the tactical missiles, well, 3 options. You have tactical missiles, you have the warhead charge, and you have the other one, well, the third one. And here you will use a very similar layout as for the previous 3 ships. The only difference would be here I am going to use a guidance disruptor general unit. Now over here I actually prefer to reduce the target's missile range, that way you can stay out of the missile range, or you can cripple the damage application of your target. Basically 2 options, both are going to be useful in different scenarios, although for solo I prefer to reduce the flight time. That way, if the target is using, let's say, rapid missiles at 20 kilometers, you orbit at 28 kilometers, and well, they will have 3 kilometer range on their missiles, and they're not going to do any damage on your ship. So technically, you can even go full DPS, because if you pick the right target, they are never going to be able to hit you. So these ships are indeed very interesting, and they have the potential to be very good solo PvP ships.
Undocking.
The only issue would be to find the correct target, because you really can't go after, let's say, a ship that uses turrets with a Blackbird that has a bonus on guided disruptors. Same thing can be applied with the RB, which has a bonus on tracking disruptors, but you can't really go after missile ships with the RB because your disruptors are not going to be effective against their weapon system. But against turret ships, the RB will do really well, and I do have plans to do PvP with the RB using the tracking disruptors with the general unit on range. Should be hilariously fun to see what happens in PvP. So the DPS and speed is okay. I wasn't able to fit a micro object because of power grid issues, although the afterburner with a build like this should work really well. Your target with this ship would be battleships, because they will be slower than your ship, and they will not be able to hit you if you have the guidance disruptors on your ship. 1.1 thousand FPS with large rapid missiles on a cruiser. I actually really do like the Blackbird, and it's kind of sad that this ship is not used much, although as you can see you can do a lot of things with these ships, a lot of interesting things. I thought about doing
Docking request
dual
accepted.
weapon times, but that would be dual weapon systems, but that would be very cursed, so I decided not to. And the rapid missiles seem to be the optimal large weapon system on this boat. And now let's take a look at the warhead charge. It should have lower DPS, but much better stable DPS or sustained DPS, which is very important. I'm thinking about doing a video about the Blackbird, because I think the ship does deserve to get a video for the build. I'm very interested to see what it can do with a silly build like this. Although primarily PvP ships, you can technically use them for PvE, although it would be a little bit weird. After all, you have the clocking device, and yeah, not really suitable for PvE, but you can do PvE in them if you like. 59 kilometer range with the long range mode. With the precision mode, the damage application should be much higher. The DPS will be a little bit lower, but application now is 41.45 meter is the explosion radius, 70 meter per second is the explosion velocity. And now with the explosive missiles, 164.36 DPS. Not bad. 1.2 thousand alpha damage. So you can do about 10,000 alpha hits with this ship. With a DPS build that goes even more up. So yeah, very scary little Blackbird. You can do so much with them. Now you can also do a normal build with normal medium missiles. These are the normal long-range medium missiles. The build now has one large booster and one large capacity battery because of the large power that I have on this boat. And with this build you can also use the tactical missiles or the warhead charge. Not because these are A-types, the DPS will be a little bit higher, but the Mark 9 missiles, Mark 9 rapid missiles have about the same DPS as the A-types. And you might be wondering, well, why do I use A-types? Well, I don't have the C-types currently, so I just used the missiles that I have in this station. But the difference is about less than 100 DPS between C-types and A-types, so not much of a big difference. The Mark 9 rapid missile launchers, larger ones, have better DPS actually. Okay, let's orbit. Now I have the my Covert, and now this is the classic kite build. Works in the same way as the previous build, just the ship is going to be flying a little bit faster, and it does have a form of tank, although if you play the ship properly, you are not going to take any damage because the targets will just do no damage to because of your guidance disruptors. 748.45 DPS, 2.3 km per second is the micro speed, so it's actually the slowest, one of the slowest. Although not really fair to compare them because I don't have auxiliary thrusters on this ship, but yeah, it's not as fast as the RB, definitely not as fast as the Bellicose. And the DPS is 178, and with the second one 1212.61 DPS. Overall, about the same DPS as the large Mark 9 rapid missile launchers, which, you know, is really good, and I'm definitely not complaining about the DPS on
docking request accepted.
And now let's take a look at the warhead charge, which is over here. Should have much better sustained DPS, although a lower paper DPS, and it can have higher applicable DPS because of the different modes that you can have on the warhead charge, which I really do like. Warhead charge is still one of my favorite implants in the game. One of the most fun to use ones, to be more accurate. Okay, my Covert on in the long range mode, 677.72 DPS. 59.95 kilometer is the range. Okay. With the precision mode, the explosion radius is 41.45. Basically, you get about the same stats as on the Mark 9 large rapid missiles. After all, the normal medium missile launchers equal the large rapid missile launchers, so you get about the same stats. 925.27 DPS with the DPS mod. Overall, really interesting little ship. Now you can do a build like this with the rapid missile launchers. It has about 098.05 DPS, almost 100 DPS. Dual points and dual guided disruptors, or well, technically 4 disruptors in the medium slots. Also usable with a micro drive, a medium to close range fit, although still a kite build, and you can do a build with the large extender. Again, if you are flying the ship properly, you are not going to be taking any damage, and you can do active tank on them, you can do passive tank on them, but the speed tank combined with the tracking or guided disruptors is going to keep this ship alive, and that's the way how to use them. And now let's take a look at the ugliest cover top ship. I mean, you know, there are some very ugly ships in EVE, but man, some of the Galanta ships are so ugly that, you know, just look at this thing. Who designed this? I really want to know what they were smoking when they have been designing this ship. This is so ugly. I mean, I don't know. The Celestis is definitely one of the ugliest ships in the game, but it's pretty good. It's a pretty good boat. So the Celestis has the same roll bonus, plus 10% sensor dump and jammer strength, minus 10% to updrive signature radius penalty for the advanced micro operation, and the advanced cruiser command minus 4% signature radius, plus 5% to the tracking, and plus 12.5% to the damage. So the Celestis has a bonus on turrets, not only on projectile turrets, but on all turrets, from small, medium, large, and even capital, but you can't really fit the capital turrets in this thing. The modularity is the same as for the Blackbird. Now this ship is a armor tank. It has a good capacitor, 2009.08 gigajoule. The capacitor recharge rate and time, I think, are the best out of the 4 Covert Ops cruisers, and the signature it's big, and the ship overall is not slow, but not the fastest. It's the second fastest, I believe, and that follows the trait Galanta ships follow. They have good armors and their ships are quick. 758.88 DPS. I have the medium autocannons. They will have a good range. Now the thing with this ship is that you don't really have to worry about using an afterburner or micro at 0 kilometers, because if you fly the ship properly, the target will never lock you, and that's how this ship is staying alive. Basically, with the Celestis, you use the dampeners to prevent the target from locking you. The larger the target, the longer they will have to wait to lock you on, and things get extremely interesting with this ship once you go to the implants, because you can enhance the dampeners a lot more. And the Celestis Cortops is used to prevent carriers and dreadnoughts from locking on your fleet. Basically, you can make them lock for 10, 15, 20 minutes, and if they can't lock you on, they can't do any damage to you. And this is how this boat stays alive. So you can use any implant. I would say use the preferred weapon type implant that you already have, because the ship has a bonus on all turrets except missiles. So if you are flying the Celestis, make sure you use turrets, not missiles, and use the implant for the turrets that you have equipped on your ship. The general units can be focused on DPS, can be focused on tank, although not really necessary. If you fly the ship properly, you will never be locked on by your target. And well, I'll just add the sensor dampener output boost, and now whoever gets locked on by this thing is going to have a very bad day, because they are just going to watch helplessly as a Celestis is slowly killing them. Now, the Celestis can run with a build like this, but again, optimal range 23 kilometers, and that should be about the orbit that you do. At 23 kilometers, the duration at which the target will lock you is going to be the longest, so lasers perhaps would be the best option at that distance, because lasers have very nice optimal. So again, that's also one of the weapon choices that you can do. But the barrage implant is known to have very good DPS. The barrage implant or the pulse focused crystal are also very good choices for lasers. As for the low slots, well, I have tank rigs as usual, although you can easily go full DPS on this ship. The right large target, a battleship, it's never going to lock you. Like 2 dampeners, 3 dampeners, and a scrambler. I think that's all that you need in a Celestis Covert Ops. You slap the dampeners on them, you orbit at 0, while they spend 8 minutes locking you. By the time they lock you on, they are dead, because most ships just don't have a good tank nowadays. And a ship like this is more than enough to kill them. Extremely good against snipers, extremely good against apocalypse strikers or any other ship basically in the game. You basically land at 23 kilometers, you add the dampeners on the target, and then you can slowly approach, or you can maintain the orbit if you want the maximum effect to last as long as possible. And honestly, as much as this ship looks hideous and ugly, it is potentially a very terrifying opponent in the right hands. Unfortunately, the Celestis Covert Ops is not really that popular. Not a lot of players, for some reason, don't know the tricks that they can do in PvP, and I'll just show you a lot of different builds that you can do. Again, scrammers, long range disruptors, webs, all that is nice, all that can be used really well, although not really necessary to have a tank on this thing, because your target will simply almost never be able to lock you on, and that makes the Celestis a very, very interesting and a very beautiful ship. And I really hope to see more of the ships flying around. The same thing can be applied to the Celestis 1 and Celestis 2. The Celestis 2 is actually a lot more cost effective. And well, this was a quick little rundown of the 4 Forest Recon or Covert Ops ships. I do plan to have separate videos for the Celestis and for the Blackbird, because these things are potentially very interesting, and I do want to see how they do in PvP, because currently I haven't seen any PvP video with these unique ships. But with that being said, hope that you enjoyed, hope that I could help you with the builds, or hope that I was able to inspire you to come up with your own build. As always, I love you all. If you want to subscribe, if you want to support me, feel free to like and subscribe. And with that being said, stay safe, fly safe, and I'll see you next time.